February 4, 2011. That will be a decade and 3 more months, Hans. What do you think about that?
Wow. Yeah, there was a gap in between, but a decade. All
Decade of
right.
shows together. Pretty incredible, huh? So I also wanted.
2020.
What's that?
Oh, good.
I was just going to say I wanted to thank people for their support and donations. Marty Gish just made a donation. Also, Adam, Lorena, Demetrius, Lee, Aaron, Devin, the Dashing Rogue, and Mickey. Mickey is who sent us the video, Music Theory and White Supremacy, some of which we may go into this evening. So thank you to Mickey for sending that. And wow, so I haven't started a show this late in a while. I'm usually right at 5 o'clock. I've thought about switching it to 6, but you look like you're a little bit tired, rushing around today.
Yeah, I literally just walked in the door and sat down, So looks like traffic is back up to kind of earlier levels. But yeah,
Well,
I'm here.
Early Gray says he heard that being punctual is racist. So you're not supposed to strive to do well anymore. Otherwise that's white privilege.
Well, I was actually right on time based on the time I gave you. So
Right. Well,
I
yeah.
know
And I,
part of
I
it's lowering
go ahead.
it's lower expectations. Just say I'll come within a 1 hour window. I may be half an hour early or half an hour late, and then therefore, there's no tension.
Yeah. Right.
You know,
Then you can just show up. We can all just stroll along and take it easy. So, the last time you were on, we were discussing War of the Worlds goes viral. That was back in April already, if you can believe that. So almost 6 months ago since you were on last.
yeah, it's been kind of a wild ride here the past 6 months, and it's continuing. But I like the fact, I didn't really watch that video, but I skimmed through here and there to check it out. But I thought it might be nice to talk about something else because we talk about the current affairs. I think we're all kind of enmeshed in them in various ways. So sometimes it's good to kind of take a step back and just you know forget about it, man.
I
Uh,
agree. All of the, we've spent so much time trying to expose social engineering and mind control and things like that for the last decade. And then just to see everybody just dive right into it and buy it all hook, line, and sinker is kind of disheartening. Wouldn't you agree?
yeah, well, it definitely demonstrates that the the power of state and non-state actors, right? So that or quasi-state actors is truly international. It's global. So you know it looks like you could put forth almost anything if you're part of the global
Cabal.
me- mesh network and just run it simultaneously. So we have, and perhaps maybe we can talk about this another time, but we really have an unfolding a sequence of events that the roots of these obviously go back further. But to me, I think this whole sequence starts with the Notre Dame fire. Continuing on, we have that like Madonna video with the people wearing gas masks. You ever remember that, right? The
Yeah.
Eurovision Song
Yeah. Well,
Contest.
we talked about that.
Yep, and now here we are, right? So
Well, and then of course, Lloyd and I and a few others did 27 shows on Islam and whatnot, and you can't help but think of the mask as a burqa. And then you've got everybody running around mask debating about their face diapers and all. So,
masturbate.
mask debating. Yeah, my mom just sent me an interesting article where they actually put the M95 masks on and they study them, with infrared lighting or whatever, and show how much the masks leak and all. And it's pretty bad. I mean, the masks pretty much do nothing as far as viruses and all go. It's kind of a joke. I was just looking for that uh, email from dear old mom, but yeah, I mean, it gets to the point of ridiculous. So, have you been a good professor wearing your mask at school for everybody?
Well, most things are now virtual, right? And this whole, I mean, guess we'll talk about it a little bit here, but yeah, this whole thing, you see so many agendas unfolding in simultaneity, and one of them is the artificial parent, right? You have the development of schools being done from home in front of your computer with an AI tutor, right? And the AI tutor, and then you have, of course, all of your, you know, monitoring systems, and then they even want to monitor, say, emotions. Okay, you can get stuff from speech patterns. You know, um,
Yeah, I did a couple of shows with John Kleisick on all of this a few months
yeah.
ago as well.
But you know what? I decided I wasn't going to get into that. At least I didn't
Uh
get it in. So I just want to go into this concept here.
oh. Okay,
I'll just dive in unless we could do a little more preamble. That's fine.
that's fine. Let's dig in.
Dive in. Okay. No. Music
Somebody
theory.
says your audio is a little low. Give me a sound check real quick.
Okay, test one, two. Test one, two. Test. I could probably come closer.
Yeah, I can crank you up a little bit too there. Give me another sound check.
Hello, test one, two. Test one, two. Test one, two.
All right,
Hello.
I brought you up a little bit. Let me lower mine down too. So since my face is right in the mic, so there we go. That
I
should
mean,
help.
I can boost my input volume, but I didn't want to clip or anything. So, I mean, you want me to come up a little bit more?
Yeah, people say you sound better when you're closer there, so I'm trying to lower mine a little bit just to help even it up a bit.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I may have to. I got the new Mac. My laptop finally crapped out, so just to use like my normal audio interface. I have to use it's like a whole string of different adapters, and I thought, you know what? It's we're just gonna go with the new high tech speakers here on the Mac. But
yeah.
yeah,
Oh, you're not wearing headphones tonight too, so but that's all right.
no, yeah, no, I've got, like I said, I have to transfer. I think I got to buy a new interface, which is, it's the Thunderbolt 3. So they're like really expensive, just for your basic, two channels. But whatever, as long as I'm audible, I'm here in the internet, back in the zone, man. I feel like I'm surrounded by screaming fans with their lighters up, the roar of the crowd.
Yeah,
You know,
well, they're all in there.
let's see them all. Just bring them all up. Everyone can say hi. No, you can do that, right? You can take have everyone say hi at the same time. That always goes really badly. Well, it's interesting cacophony, but anyways, yeah. So the video that was sent and sort of a topic, and I again I as a caveat, I didn't really delve into if there's a lot of stuff saying music theory is racist, this and that. I just kind of looked, I glanced at the video. I thought it'd be a good topic because it does tie into one aspect of current events and processes that have been going on for quite a long time. So, um, just the question, is music theory racist? I mean, you could say, is Al Gore racist? I don't know. Is music theory? So music theory has its own attitude. Music theory, is music theory a living entity? Like, hey, I'm music theory. So, you know, Nietzsche. I
Oh
mean,
wow.
so it's
It,
you
it's
know,
it's kind of a non it's what would that be, a non sequitur or equivocation? They're applying qualities of people onto a theory and then trying to say that the theory is what the people are.
yeah, well, it's a personification, right?
Right.
Um, and so we just kind of break the question apart. I'll do that just for in the beginning because I think it's important to see how just our language, how we perceive what things are, even one of the basic properties of perception and of language is to distinguish between entities, right? You need to be able to distinguish between entities. This is a pencil, you know, this is a bong, you know. What if I just lit up a bong right now? It would just It's all been a lie. I've been high the whole time, Jan. No, but basically, so we want to distinguish between entities and certain qualities. So language, we look at how language is used and how questions are framed. So then we go to the next term. Well, I'll get into music and theory a bit later, but racist, right? So actually, the term racist is another word that is not really a clear term, right? It's like a football game with movable goalposts, right? So
Right.
maybe, and that's a great idea. If you have someone that's not quite as fast, you can like move the, knock 10 yards off the finish
But
line
if
for
you're
you.
if you're yeah, but if you're faster, aren't you a racist?
No, you're not. I don't think. I think that's not one of the qualities. Um,
Well,
but
but in socialism, everybody gets a medal just for participating. It's not for doing good.
well, you've won. I mean, as soon as you get out of bed in the morning, you've won life. You're
Well,
just like,
right. You deserve just because you exist, not because you've actually done anything.
yeah. Well, I have think of a lot of things I deserve. Like I want a big personal sauna, with on staff masseuses. Maybe I can get that. It's you get anything you want, right? But the term racist is actually relatively a new word. So primarily with Trotsky, and I won't get into the whole origin of the term, but you have that ist, right? Ist, misogynist, this, that, so the racist, again, it has sort of fluid and functionally, ideologically driven boundaries. So it's not really a clear term. I think essentially, though, if we want to, give people the benefit of the doubt, there's two terms that would go into racist that make sense. One is racial prejudice. Okay. So this is different from another neologism, which is discrimination, right? So racism and discrimination kind of go hand in hand because they don't really have clearly defined meanings, right? You discriminate. Well, I discriminate between hot and cold. If I have a scalding hot shower and I don't discriminate and I get burned, that's because I didn't discriminate between hot and cold water, right? So, so we have to, you know, but prejudice, on the other hand, which is an actual term, so race prejudice is someone that thinks, okay, I think Mexican Bob is lazy because all Mexicans are lazy. So, which actually probably isn't true, right? These guys work like crazy, They do a bunch of coke and they're like just working like crazy. Just joking. No, but see, there you go. Now I'm in trouble. No, I'm just
Now
showing
you're
the.
making stereotypes, right?
Well, no, but that's race. It's an example of prejudice.
Right.
All white people are racist. Well, that's a type of race prejudice, right? So you're ascribing a global quality to a group of people. And that's prejudice, right? So you're prejudiced against, whatever. I'm prejudiced against mosquitoes. But I don't like being bitten. But the other term is racialist, right? Which is an earlier term. And racialist is a clearly defined term as well. And a racialist believes that, well, first of all, that their particular race that they're part of, that they, consider themselves to be a member of this definition or category, deserves to have some boundaries, some protective measures about it. And racialists can also go into the concept that this particular race is superior. Okay, so I could say the white race is superior. I could say the Mexican race is superior, whatever. And I could say, so that's racialist. So racialist, that's actually a term that means something. Okay, so racist sort of combines elements of these two things with all kinds of other random elements, right? So we have a word that's very, very elastic, right? That can be applied. It's kind of like silly putty. I mean,
Well,
silly putty.
I wanted to bring up, and by the way, thanks, Mr. Winters, for the $44.44 donation on the backup channel. Many thanks. He says he's not on the primary channel tonight because he's social distancing. So, but what is a race? And like you said, it's like silly putty. But so the act of running a race, like so if you're in the 100-yard dash, I guess you're a racist.
Well, this we have like, eugenics movement, right? And we also have um, sometimes something isn't defined until it becomes in contact with what it is not, right? So there may be one word, for example, if you're a member of a tribe, say if you're a Viking or something, there'll be a different words for different groups of people. And generally speaking, the community itself or nation will tend to, you know, have its own sort of embedded protocols for basically for breeding or for, human pair bonding.
Yeah,
You know,
well, a group of persons, animals, or plants connected by common descent or origin, the offspring or prosperity of a person, a set of children or descendants.
yeah, yeah. And so the one of the really negative connotations of the term racist is, of course, eugenics, which is, well, hey, we have our, of course, that's a whole nother topic, but Bill Gates is, connected with Margaret Sanger, or at least his father,
Yep.
William Henry Gates the fourth or
Yep.
whatever.
Yeah,
Third.
putting Planned Parenthood centers in black neighborhoods to wipe them out. And I've read the letters of Margaret Sanger and Julian Huxley at Princeton.
Yeah. And, and eugenics can also just be like, well, there's a natural thing of, well, I would like to marry, a hot Nordic blonde, athletic, intelligent blonde lady because I don't know, we have that in common and I happen to be attracted to that. So that's an example of, in a certain way, it's a type of eugenics in that there's a choice and there's certain categories, or, even if, say, a certain social class, the former WASP social class is still around, but no longer in the positions of power as once before. But that's an example of where if you're in elite circles, you're probably going to marry someone from a similar standard. You're probably not going to go marry the guy that like cleans the donkeys in the stable. Maybe you will, but but that's an example of where that is a type of eugenics, you could say, in terms of controlling dissent or whatever. Okay, so that's just a little bit. So we have a little bit of a spurious term. We can go into this whole idea of racism, which we will, but it's not a logically consistent term, I don't think. So that's one thing that is important. But so if we look at even is music theory, um, so the real question, let's just refrain or refine the question. Is music theory a property of inherently intrinsic and inherent to European culture with the added footnote, European culture, white culture is always racist? So that's the actual question. Is music theory a property inherent to racist European culture? That's, or whatever. So that is actually what they're asking.
Well,
Right?
and you start with a premise, is it inherent to racist European culture? So you start with the premise that European culture is by definition racist. If you go to, well, and it's like this white privilege thing. No matter what culture you're in, if you're in India, and you've been to India many times, Indians in India are going to have Indian privilege. If you're in Mexico, Latinos are going to have Mexican privilege. If you're in Africa, you're going to have African privilege. Right? So no matter where you go, you have that privilege. But, when you're living in 1700s Germany, for instance, that's the culture, that's the people. You don't have this influx of, people. I mean, obviously you had many Muslim invasions, like 500 Muslim invasions that tried to overrun Europe and enslave everyone. But in general, it was a white European culture. And because it was in the colder climates, they tended to invent things more quickly. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, one of the primarily relates to the planning for the future because if you have a sort of a mono climate or maybe a binary climate, then it doesn't require as much forward thinking. For example, if you're going to die in the winter, if you haven't stored any food,
Right.
then you're going to start to develop the ability to plan ahead and to organize, and you're going to want to minimize labor. But one point I just want to make, though, is the question is music theory racist? It doesn't say directly, is music theory an inherent prop. So it's not saying a type of music theory, it's saying music theory as a totality. So that's an example of this totalization or essentialization that we have in these really bad arguments, right? So you thought, what do music theory, you're by posing the question the way that it's responded to, the way that it fits into our contemporary culture, what it actually means is music theory, again, a property inherent to European civilization, which is by definition racist. But as you mentioned, one good thing is you have intra and outra. Okay, so we have within a certain quote unquote race or a group. If you say, oh, the white race, well, look at the Italians, at least in the United States. Look at the how the British thought of the Irish. I mean, so this is look at the Roma people. Okay, the
Right,
gypsies.
gypsies, right, yeah.
Yeah,
Sigany.
but gypsies are a lot more sort of more displaced from the overall culture. But and then look at it in India. Okay, you have the Brahmins, right? So you even have these Brahmin bloodlines. They go back to the rishis, right? The ancient rishis. You have like Bharadwaj Rishi. You have Rishi. You have all these different rishis that are still considered to actually be alive. They're sort of transcended beings, but they can still come down from the mountains or whatever on our plane. But this goes
Well,
back. But I'm saying that they have their own. They would think that within the caste system,
well,
to
I
sort
was just going to mention, India is set up in a caste system that's essentially based on racism.
well, it didn't used to be, but I mean that's of course a long time ago. Maybe 800-900 years ago, 1,000 years ago, whatever. But yeah, it's that you have so the Brahmin, is you have the Shudra, which is the at least in North India, right? It's a lower class. They're actually you can say they're the indigenous inhabitants, and they're considered a lower caste. And they're definitely you're not going to find the Brahmins, at least traditionally, marrying a Shudra. I mean, like they could get, they would even if you did, you could get killed, right? I mean, not now, I'm sure, but it does. So that's even within a given society or culture, right? And so and then the last thing I think is funny about this question before I actually start answering it, hopefully this is just what I thought of today when I was thinking about it, is that the positive of the question negates it. So it's saying basically all music theory is racist. White is racist, yet whites must have created all music theory. So we already have now included all of music theory as part of European culture, right? So you know what I mean? So in a certain sense, you're defining yourself against something that you're now defining as being just inherent to this group. So that's, I don't know if that makes sense, but that's,
Yeah.
so it's not really,
Which is ironically racist in itself by saying that the white European music theory is racist. One thing that gets me, just a quick or segue here, is that you have this constant relativist fallacy within the BLM and these different groups where only white people can be racist. They can't be racist because they're not white. And it's, the thing is, under logic, what's true for one group can be true for another group. If you're putting out all of this racist rhetoric against another group, that is racism by definition. It's, what's true for one group is true for the other group.
yeah, but it's no, it's another thing is we have mixing of categories, we have local and global categories. So, you know, yeah, all the definitions are pretty skewed. It's not an intellectually sound argument, but I mean, just that whole thing with the racism. But um, you know, we just want to look at what music theory is. So first of all, and this is what I think is interesting, right? So that was like sort of the preamble. We can go back to that, but so I already said no. What music theory isn't racist.
Right.
So basically, I'm done. I can just all right. Good to talk to you, Jan. Great, I enjoyed it. No, I ran out of things to say. No, but so the question of quote unquote racism to me is really a non-question because you can't, well, it's a question that can't be approached scientifically, right? So I could say, for example, is Joe a nice person? No, I think Joe is a jerk. No, Joe is a good person. This, that. So, we have sort of general qualities, and you have five people are going to come up with five different definitions of whoever Joe is, right? So, we can't really answer it, but we can, first of all, what's behind that question? What are we being blocked from experiencing or learning about when we get caught up into these mesh works of just basically stupidity and fallacy that we're afraid to pull it apart? Oh, I'm afraid of that word. No, I'm not afraid of the word. Word's gonna come and bite me. That's basically, you're this. I mean, if someone says you're a bastard, well, hey, thank you. Well, you may not say thank you, but we have to
Just
look at
don't just don't call me nice, because that means foolish, stupid, that kind of stuff.
yeah. But well, one thing though to keep in mind is that definitions of words change. Societies within those words made sense. Change. Words can be like, for example, the word gay. That's word gay has been meant, this kind of spontaneous, happiness. I feel, gay, which is like a really nice word. I'm feeling gay.
Yeah,
So,
and up until
gay.
about the '60s, early '70s, then it was what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, it was changed to mean something totally different, when in fact it does mean happy.
Yeah, and a very specific type of happiness, right? Carefree, just but like a naturally arising feeling. So, but anyways, but music theory to me is very interesting, right? Because music theory is a window really onto any culture, right? Any society, at least like say the superior white society. I'm totally kidding, man. Oh my gosh. I had to throw that in there. No, no, I'm totally kidding.
You're going to upset the liberals,
No, I'm just making. I'm absolutely completely joking. But I think it's funny because I say that, and it's such a hot button thing. No, I'm going to say something that just saying how this is inherent to all systems of music, but it certainly doesn't entail a type of superiority. It entails a type of a system. So music theory is related to three factors. One is perception, one is cultural systems, and one is cosmology. All right. So any type of music theory is going in its origin and even in its sort of modern iterations is going to have evolved from these kind of three layers, right? Perception. What do we experience as sound? How is music perceived? What is the listening environment? We have the physical properties of sound, right? This is an actually existing thing, right? It's not just that I'm inventing it. I mean, I could say, like Jerry Garcia talks about, and, laying the dead to rest about everybody in the future, wearing these virtual like sex suits, and they can have virtual sex, and they can make up their own musical instruments and their own language just floating around in their heads, in their virtual like wombs. I mean, it's something that's really cool. Like, oh, that seems really cool, man. I mean, no, it seems like that would suck, man. Jesus, what if you made a really bad song and you couldn't stop it and it's trapped in your head? Well, that's a solipsism, but actually with music, we're looking to the world outside of us, right? And so just to start out with, Western music theory, it comes out of the Greek, primarily Greco-Roman. We have some like Assyrian, notation and things like that. But the most dominant strand of that is the Greco, the Greek culture and really how they viewed music, right? And so in Greek culture, music was viewed as an abstract science, a branch of mathematics whose elements could be computed. Okay, so it's an abstract science. It's related directly to the trivium and the quadrivium.
Correct.
And it has these inherent properties. As a power, as a force that can shape both individuals and society. Okay, so music, and this is the Greek music theory. This is one of the components as a force that can shape culture and society. As an art, that is something that that could be enjoyed, right? As an aesthetic, as something that adds beauty to life and experience, right? So if I throw on like Yanni, the guy who plays the Greek pan flute guy, if I'm really stressed out, I just throw on Yanni. I remember when he came to India and they literally tore down this entire village. They just flattened the village to build a stage, and it was supposed to be this like eco-friendly thing, and they had all these billboards, but unfortunately they misspelled his name. So it came out as the word yoni, which is actually the Sanskrit word for vagina, the female organ. So,
Right.
and then he got searched for drugs in the airport. But anyways, so Yanni,
Did they catch it? Did he have anything?
I don't think he did, but he may have, paid off because he's got really cool hair. I mean, that guy, you cannot bust someone with hair that cool. Just
right, yeah.
But so anyways, so this understanding of music, right? And the important thing is seeing it as a science as well, right? So this helped kind of formulate the whole music theory that we developed in the West. And we look at, Pythagoras is one of the first people to develop music theory based upon actual physical phenomena, right? Taking the monochord, dividing the strings into specific intervals.
It's like Donald Duck in Mathemagic Land.
Oh, yeah, man, I haven't seen that for a long time, man. That's
if you put it up on YouTube, they'll attack you real fast and shut down your channel. But that music theory and white supremacy video did show 10-second clips of it.
Yeah, well, looks like that guy's. Yeah, I don't know. I've had even I have people say my PayPal account isn't working. I think it's working, but I just had such a pain in the butt uploading stuff to YouTube. I was like, well, forget it, forget YouTube. But so we look at music. One thing about music in Greece, though, was considered to be a practice of refined citizens, right? It's sort of like an art. Was not really considered to be a professionalized art, at least initially, right? It was like highly skilled amateurs. So it wasn't something that was necessarily done as like a trade. It was seen as something maybe a little bit higher than that. But another important element of music in Greek society is this connection with ethos or ethics, right? So music is a direct outflow of ethos. And so basically, Plato talks about how Greek culture is starting to decline because of the introduction of new forms of music and then you start to have the growth at the beginning of this time of the professional virtuoses, like the Kenny G's, the Kenny G's of Greece. Kenny G, that guy, he can hold one note and walk around the block, and just playing that same note. He's probably got like 10 people playing that note. He's faking it, but Kenny G, according to Plato, would contribute to the vulgarity of modern music and start to show the beginnings of decline. And the fact is, yes, did Greece decline? Yes, they did, obviously.
And you and I have done so many shows showing the decline of our culture through music as well. And, just since you and I did the Music, Mind Control, Psychobiology series, 5 years ago now, look how far things have declined just in the last 5 years. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, and I was doing stuff like watching the music, and in fact, maybe I can go into that at some point. If you look at the really popular music and some of these different genres, especially some of the rap and this kind of thing, especially geared towards younger kids, you can really see this process. And it's actually beginning initially in the music, and then it starts to manifest in the physical world. It may take 1 year, it may take 2 years, it may take 6 months, but eventually, at least according to Plato and ancient China and many others, including Western scholars or philosophers, that it does have an effect, and I think we can trace that. It's just that putting myself through listening to some of that music in depth, I don't know. I started to get tattoos all over my body, body piercing.
Well, I see that one right, on your neck there, and you got that FU tattooed on your forehead there,
Yeah, that would be great. That would you tattoo FU on your forehead.
I met this guy. He was a super cool guy, but he had "Live Free or Die" tattooed on the back of his head and FU and the full thing tattooed on the front of his head.
It's a great way. It's just that's pretty cool. if you're just going to live that way all the time, like, there you go.
Well, I think he was like from a rough neighborhood, so trying to put out a certain image to scare people off, which probably worked for most of them. Every time I'd see him, he'd be like, "Yawn, bro, hug." It was like, did that just happen? It was just such a cognitive disconnect with his appearance and his behavior.
Should have gotten henna tattoo, man. You can always wash that off, right? Henna tattoo. Uh, but so anyways, so we look at music was seen for Plato as being one of the central aspects of shaping the youth, right? And you're actually building your culture from the youth, right? So the education, it's even possible as we see in our time, right? By changing the education, you can vastly transform a society almost right underneath people's noses. Yet it does, obviously, it's going to take time. It probably takes 20 years or so.
Right. Well, Huxley said it would take, what, 3 generations or so to completely change a whole society and culture?
Well, it almost didn't, though. I mean, there's still residual elements that haven't been changed, but it's you can see though changes. Well, I guess what you can see is an exponential range of how rapidly things can be deployed, and the agenda or the end goal has not changed, in that process. But you can see all these different steps, and now you can see how much faster, right, this can be employed. But anyways, back to Plato. So for Plato, he said to have a balanced human being, right, was gymnastics and music. So gymnastics, right, in having that physical strength, coordination, to challenge, to have a healthy body. Um, and he said he believed that music without that physical element, which is a rigorous, right? Or anyone done, like I used to do gymnastics. I didn't just throw that in there because I did gymnastics, by the way. But but it's what Plato said. But gymnastics, man, it's hard, right? It's not easy if you ever done some of that stuff. So I mean, I'm not saying I do that now. I wish.
I was in the Y circus as a kid doing cradle hanging from the ceiling and riding giraffe unicycles.
Yeah. Well, the thing about it though is, see, it's kind of an individual pursuit, right? So you're doing that stuff with, whether it's the pommel horse or, you're doing flips, but you're still doing that within your own self, right? So it's different from it, very different from a team sport, right? Okay. But, so yeah, without music, um, music without gymnastics, without physical, rigorous and developing physical activity, right? Not just like breaking rocks on the chain gang or whatever, will dissolve a man's spirit. And just physical activity without the refining quality of higher music would foster violent savagery and a bestial nature in man, foster a bestial nature of violence, rage, and actually move people closer to the animal level. Um, and so, the ethos, which is the moral and character, the overall ethos, right? What's the ethos of America right now, right? We can look at the ethos of America, but it determines the nature and the moral character, again, according to Plato, of the people. And so it must be regulated by the state. It's too powerful to be left in the hands of the virtuosi, that are, great, getting mass audiences. I mean, maybe there's someone else I could say, I don't know, Buckethead, Kenny G and Buckethead. No, I mean, I don't know. But that would be kind of
who's that guy that used to throw feces on stage? The punker. What was his name?
Oh yeah, I always blank
We
out
we
that.
talked about him in our series a few times.
Yeah, no, that guy was really sort of a tragic story because he became punk rock, right? He
Oh yeah,
became
G.G. Allen.
G.G. Allen became
Yeah.
the essence, the end of punk rock. And the weird thing about G.G. Allen, he was totally normal, right? Normal guy. And then his elder brother and his buddies playing a joke dosed him with a bunch of LSD when he was like in high school, like 16, 17 years old. He never came back to normal. So he basically launched off from that. But that also shows that influence, right? Of the music, how that influences you. And, I won't get too much deep into this, but ethos is very important. So, and the fact was that music, though, well, we'll get into that in a second, but with the different modes, right? Have we have these different scales? I even have a keyboard. I can play notes on a keyboard. I'm not a fraud. Look, here's a C major. No. Here's a C major chord. Look, I'm not a fraud. I can play a C major chord. No, just kidding. That wasn't that funny. I mean, if I could just play a C major chord, and they're like, he can't really play. But, anyways, the fact is that exposure to a specific scale or a type of music, the greater the degree of exposure, again, according to Plato, would have the greatest influence on the person. So if you hear like a song once or twice, it's not going to influence you that much. But if you start hearing it day and night, all the time, listening to it when you go to sleep, hearing it,
This is Casey Kasem with America's Top 40, where we repeat the top songs day in and day out to get you to think they're the top songs.
Yeah. but anyways, yeah. So, we go into this idea of music theory. So again, it's not just one aspect of music, right? I mean, it's, in our modern music theory, which we're, if we look at, say, from the, 19th century on, especially, late 19th century, we have a lot more emphasis on this scientific aspect of it, right? So we're not going to talk about, say, music of the spheres, right? And so this was part of, I mentioned cosmology, right, as being one of the parts of music theory. So the cosmology, right, is that all the intervals or distances between the different planets are represent intervals, right? A musical note, like a type of consonance or dissonance, a specific sound, just like on the monochord, right? So, and that also ties into the human spine and, the human body, the different humors or the elements of the body. So we see it's tying the local cosmology and the universal cosmology, right there in Greek music theory. So now I'll just kind of stop there with that because I had a bunch of references, but it's interesting.
You want to go into them, or you just want to skip over them?
Well, I could go, maybe, we'll see. I'll come back to it. It's just more detail just about how it actually works, just kind of going over the music theory of the Middle Ages, Boethius, actually developed at Notre Dame. So really modern music theory came from the Greeks, kind of dissipated, and then starting from the beginning, the Notre Dame Cathedral, and that is actually where the real development of modern music or sort of Western music developed. And so now just to put that aside and just let's look at another example of a different culture, okay, that's not a inherently racist culture. Let's say like white people. Oh, no, I'm just kidding. No. Let's look at, say, Indian music theory. So in India, you have music theory based on, you have these derivations of different notes. You have types of scales, and you have classifications of melodies known as ragas that tie into different types of emotions. But in the Indian music theory, which is still kind of there today, this ragas or these scales also tie into the human body as it goes through the diurnal cycle of day and night, right?
Right.
So your body and mind changes as you're on the earth, as your earth's relative position is to the sun, et cetera, or during different seasons. So this, this theory of music is actually coming right out of nature. And we still have, the derivations of the different sounds and pitches, but it has this other aspect, which is the cosmology of the original sound, which is the Nad Brahma. So you say like the beginning, the original vibration, right? That starts all the whole manifestation into physical matter eventually. So music is actually related to this vibratory principle that informs everything. And so that's part of it. And then there's like, you can go where they have, visualizations of different, deities or, sort of visualizing certain personifications of a musical form and drawing that from this mind space, right? So here we have a definition of consciousness where there's a separate element of mind, manas, that's actually even pre the verbal learning, right? Is not really in the brain. It's sort of beyond the brain. It could be perceived of in the brain, but it's sort of beyond that. But that's another example of music theory. So Indian music has music theory. We can look at, Balinese music. They also have music theory. They have a different tonal range. They have different types of scales. But their music is very much tied into the cyclical progression, progression of time. And they have very different notes, though. So, but it's still based on principles because you have to have this. You're actually manifesting something physically. You need a physical object. So you have to, for example, in Bali, you have to produce a gong that's going to give a specific pitch, right? So, we see that. So already we're back to the fact, well, music theory, how is that racist? Because other cultures have music theory. So are you saying that these other cultures' music theory, is it somehow different? Is it not valid? I don't know. So that's just, one aspect, we look at that is that how do we fit music into society? How do we analyze it and measure it and understand it in a scientific, in a mathematical way, and an aesthetic way, in a way that ties into our relationship with nature, that ties into how we perceive the world, that ties into how our perceptions of the world are shaped and how we allow those perceptions to be shaped, right? So there is a level of where we allow ourselves to be exposed to things that may have very harmful effects, or may have very beneficial effects, or may not have any effect at all. May just be just plain old boring, right? Like elevator music. Or maybe that's the worst of everything. It's all because of Muzak, It was all hidden, the hidden Muzak tapes, Maybe, who knows? So, Jan, you can chime in there, and I'll go to the next point.
Speaking of the worst music, what is, just on a segue here, what do you think is the worst music in your opinion? Have we ever discussed the worst music?
I mean, it really depends on how you define
hippies sitting around playing didgeridoos and drums.
Not necessarily.
I'm just giving them crap.
No, it's always when the guy with the cases, he's got like 3 didgeridoos and like road cases. You know that your jam session is just going to hell. The didge guy shows up. There's certain things that that are really bad, but I find them, if they're just bad in a kind of an honest way, I can find it entertaining, right? It's just like it's just a really terrible version of a song or something. It can be kind of entertaining, right? You get a little bit of schlock or something. It's actually kind of funny, right? But the worst music, it depends on how you define it, right? Worst music in terms of neurophysiological effects, the worst music in terms of just what I just don't like, the worst music, because
somebody says you think Alice Cooper is the worst music. Overly produced pop music that doesn't even have camp value.
Well, there's stuff that is actually I think is actually really harmful.
Right. Which we discussed in our shows, especially rap music and kids trying to do homework. That's a big no-no.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it would just kind of depend. The one thing is that if you look at it objectively or sort of scientifically, you can actually listen to music. If you ever stuck somewhere, you just have to hear something. You can kind of take it apart and see what are they doing? How is this put together? Why are they playing this? So it kind of gives us a sort of a sense of stepping back from it. But Alice Cooper, School's Out. I just heard that song again and it just brought a tear to my eye. Forever.
Yeah.
You're blowing up the school. That's a little foreshadowing, right?
Right. Well, yeah.
School's been blown to pieces.
Well, hasn't he made a total about face or something? Isn't he like a Christian preacher now?
Who knows, man? Yeah, these guys. It's like who's that guy? Uh, General Buck Naked, who used to be a cannibal.
No.
He's a preacher. Yeah,
General Buck Naked, never heard of that one.
yeah, he's in Liberia. Was in Liberia, so he ran this like cannibal corpse of like, I mean, corpse meaning like a CRPS, like a like his mostly kids, right? And they would, and yeah, it was pretty. So he's like, he's all good now though. So, but I guess he's saved, so whatever. But you know,
Yeah, he became a devout Christian. He's being a preacher now.
Alice Cooper, wow.
Yeah.
That's well, the thing is though that like, Alice Cooper, you can see, you've got one thing in terms of worst, right? Like one thing that he did, which if you look at some of the stuff, which I think is very important in terms of how this overall conditioning system works, is by programming, types of response patterns into people in sort of a wide array so you can impact a variety of people. And when like Alice Cooper did stuff with the Muppets, like Welcome to My Nightmare and stuff like that, it's actually pretty scary. I mean, that could like traumatize a little kid, you know. So there's stuff like promoting Alice Cooper to little kids. That's where, or how about Kiss, right? Kiss used to have their own, if you could play a clip from it, they used to have their own like sitcom. Kiss had a sitcom where they were like,
I don't have anything queued up. Do you know? Let me see here.
they used to like they were flying around in like spaceships or something. I think it's just got awful. But I mean,
Here, let me see if I can. Not seeing anything pop up. Watch, they'll ding the episode as soon as we show anything.
you can just play it silently.
Oh,
But,
wait. Zurich full concert. Yeah, they look like satanic clowns, actually.
yeah, but I mean, this is being promoted to like 4, 5, 6, 7-year-old kids. And so you see that with a lot of this stuff. You can see the same thing with, you know, um, you know what? It's not, man. I wonder if they just scrub that because it's like it's kind of a combination of like a really bad version of like Buck Rogers in the 21st century, which is also a really bad show.
I just saw that. I just saw that come across in a meme today. I hadn't thought of Buck Rogers in ages.
It's just a horrible show, and the Kiss show was like 1,000 times worse than that. So they could have just wiped it off the internet. But anyways, so worst music, I mean, there's stuff that I just don't listen to. I mean, I don't, there's, I try to not listen to a lot of stuff. There's probably a lot of good music that I'm not listening to, but I don't know. I just,
Well, since we've done all of these shows, I've totally just about cut all the pop music out of my life. It's nauseating to listen to it anymore. You ruined me for music, Hans. Somebody mentioned our secret history of FM radio. I totally forgot about that one. That's a good one too.
yeah. No, there's a lot of, the thing is that, not every pop song is bad. There's some songs that are good. There's songs that, you have to remember too that there's the associational level, right?
Right.
They're playing our song, Jan. They're playing our song. Wonder what that would be. I don't know, Jan. Oh my God, that's getting a little too man. What's it called? Man, bro? No,
Bro love, man.
bro love.
Right.
Man, oh, man, bro. Oops. Ah, that sounds like something else. Oh my gosh, I'm in trouble now. Now, but the maybe the theme from Love Story or like Beyonce. I don't know, but basically, there's different things. It's when one thing is that people can be locked into patterns in their life, and they're really linked with types of music, right? So, maybe music is not that bad per se, but it's also when you have this thing of where you can just listen to pre-recorded music over and over again, right? So you can just keep reliving that little section of time. That's a very new thing. I mean, look at human beings, right? So how long, let's say not until, let's say by, the LP advent of the LP record until records were really widely disseminated, by say the 1950s, 60s in that era, it wasn't something that everybody had. They could just, you could listen to your little scratchy 33, but you're not going to mistake that, or your 78 RPM. It's only 2 or 3 minutes long, right? You're not going to mistake that for a live performance, or you're not going to have to look, it's not going to be as much interaction, right, in the community.
I was just gonna play some Chris Mayville there, that Huxley song. Remember that?
Yeah, that used to be your theme, so maybe that's our song, Jan. I was
Yeah, there
thinking.
you go.
Mammy and no more pappy. Ain't we lucky, oh, ain't we happy? Everybody's oh so happy. Everybody's happy now. Sex galore.
Anyway,
No more.
we'll get back on topic here. Sorry about that.
Yeah. But anyway, so back to my just a little answer to that question, and we can go on to something else. But so what is specific about Western music theory, right? What is specifically important about it? And again, I'm not going to go through the whole development through like basically we have like different types of plain chant and liturgical, the Catholic Church, being very important to developing these different liturgies and writing of counterpoint, stuff like that. But one of the things unique to Western music is really the advanced development of harmony. Okay, so harmony is where you're stacking up chords, right? You're creating chords, and then you're being able to move these chords and create very complex patterns of these sort of wavefront, right? You're merging notes together and developing a whole theory of chords. And it's not that chords are unique to Western music, but the development of harmony to the extent it has been developed is definitely unique to Western music. And you could say music theory. So therefore you have that sort of relation. Okay, you're going to say tonal harmony or types of songs with chords and melodies and things like that is developed to its greatest extent in Western music. Another thing is the theory of notation. So there's a very, very advanced, completely unique to Western music, and Western music theory is a system of notation. So nothing like that exists, right? Or had exist to the level of detail and to the level of complexity and the range, to write a symphony, right? So you can have ensembles, right? You can have, say, for example, they're called heterophonic, where you have the same melody played in different ways. You can have sort of call and response, things like that. But they're still generally speaking based on a single melodic line. With harmony, you can suddenly have, massive complexity, introduce such a huge range of instruments and have 100, 200 people playing the same thing at the same time and not playing the same part, right? I mean, so it's a major development of Western music. And then, with music theory, there's certain rules, right? So certain things develop over time of, like, for example, counterpoint, which is where you have two or more melodic lines going in different directions. How do you write? What kind of things? What are some of the rules? Like, parallel fifths or this or that. There's certain rules. Well, part of that is how that it sounds good, right? That's how that developed. But actually, you can look scientifically if you look at a frequency spectral analysis of a single note, right? There's so many different harmonic overtones. So we hear a single note, we're actually hearing a really complex, excuse me, phenomena, and our brains make it sound like one sound, but actually there's many different parts, right? Different frequencies that are all being sounded together. And so understanding that allows to make very, very complex, musical structures, but also informs, right, that whole Western harmony, and things like that. So, but one of the aspects of Western sort of music theory as it relates to, say, classical music is, a lot of different, very specific forms, like types like a rondo, like a sonata, a symphony, different types of forms that are like a shared formal structure that different composers can develop in their own way, but it still has a lot of sort of inherent boundaries and rules. So that may be another aspect that's perhaps racist, makes music theory racist. So, but basically, just to end up here, I mean, if we look at it as being racist or not, I mean, the fact is that where things become so specialized, right? When people don't really have sort of a basic grasp of just basic understanding of some of the elements of music, like, or art, right? Art education, having to go through, understand visual art, having to understand literature, or at least being exposed to it. That's also being taken away, right? So that when you don't have exposure to difficult music or difficult writing, or writing that's of value, or art that has a lot of different levels to it, that may seem boring when you're 10 years old, but maybe when you're like 90 years old, you're like, man, I love that. If you're not blind at that point, right? But basically, so I think that the question is not only a bad question, but it's idiotic, because you need to specify what you think is racist, and then you really have to go, well, you're talking about the development of tonal harmony. Does that mean that other people, if you find Cuba, or if you look at, music in Brazil that uses harmonic chord progressions, are they racist because they're using European chord progressions, or not, right? Or is it no longer racist when someone else, starts developing it within their own indigenous culture? So it's a stupid question, but it's important to ask it and understand like what's behind this, and what's behind it, as I said, is really a breakdown of the essences, the basic boundaries that we have in our culture and our society, basic types of ethos or acting or ethics, like what's wrong, what's right, like situational ethics. You can basically do anything when you get into situational ethics. You can justify, well, I had a headache, so I just thought about burning that building down.
Yeah. So Andy Destruction in the on the backup channel. Thanks for the super chat, Andy. The backup channel showing up the primary channel tonight. He says, Hans, you still owe him a copy of the new book, brother. And he says, is all modern rock music weaponized? Seems like the indie punk bands of the late 70s, early 80s started off with legit intent. And by the 80s, 90s, it was turned into left propaganda. And then he says, pardon his screen name. But anyway, he goes on, mention the dead Kennedys, etc.
Okay.
And,
Hey,
go ahead.
let me, I'm going to go ahead and actually, I'll send it to you. I'm going to send an email address you can pass on to him.
Hey, yeah, Andy, would you send me an email, contact@logosmedia.com?
Yeah. Because I have honestly, like, I've had issues with like not getting emails and stuff from people, and I don't know if or else I didn't get sent out. Yeah, so I'll have to take care of that. And so this is my new email here, or not relatively new. And so yeah, I just use that. I just sent that to you. You can just forward it to him. But so the question is, well, punk rock actually,
You're welcome, Andy. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the punk rock, to be honest, if you start looking into it, it did, I mean, like for myself and stuff, whatever. I mean, I thought it was pretty cool thing. It seemed like it's connected with like skate. I mean, obviously this is not.
Oh yeah, I had the long, skater bangs and all when I was like 15, riding around listening to DK and stuff.
Yeah,
Suicidal Tendencies. Great name, right?
I'm not crazy. Yeah,
Institutionalized. You're not crazy. Institutionalized. Anyway.
But if you do see that, first of all, there is a shaping of lines of development, right? So, I mean, for example, just anything, just even as a professional thing, well, if somebody's like, well, I can really, work hard and, say like it used to be like, say, if you're doing, say, like cabaret music or something like that, you have to learn a whole bunch of songs, right? You got to learn a lot. You got to be pretty competent. I mean, you're not necessarily going to be playing like, Beethoven, but, you're still going to have a pretty high level of music to play all the parts, read the music, right? With rock, you have a simplification, right? You're going back to the folk music ish thing, but then it's being put upon as this commercial music, right? And so obviously I'm kind of fast forwarding, but the punk rock, it started out like, say, the New York Dolls. You could even say a little bit with Velvet Underground a bit earlier. Is sort of like a precursor. And there's a few other bands, like that, but, like the garage rock and stuff like that, even like Link Ray, Rumble, the first guy to use electric, distorted guitar, the song Rumble, right? So you could say that sort of an antecedent of the punk rock. And so, but the fact is that there's a feeling attached to it, right? Which is just kind of jamming out, right? You could hear songs that kind of sounded like that. And then it kind of started to become an actual genre, again, with the New York Dolls, when traveling to the United States and looking for some new type of thing, having the boutique Malcolm McLaren, the Sex Boutique, right? And really promoting the Sex Pistols. So it was definitely a, it was intended, you could describe it as, I mean, you talk about a happening, right? So if you look at the art world, like avant-garde art, starting in the early 60s, like let's have a happening, they had stuff like this, right? So you have like five people on stage, like having sex. That's a happening. Seriously, they had stuff like that. And that's called like or just, a bunch of people go outside wearing masks and like jump around and make noises or something. That's a happening, right? So you're doing an artwork that sort of interjects itself into the social realm. Okay. And so, and that's actually how a lot of these protests that are going on now are actually sort of under the designation of like avant-garde protest art. That's why certain activities are not really being prosecuted, or at least that's one of the justifications, right? So it goes into this, performance art, da da da. So, anyways, so the Sex Pistols, were kind of a top-down phenomena, right? You can look into how they were shaped. Now the other guys in the band, Johnny Rotten, probably was the most highly intellectual of the group. But what happened to the rest of the people in the band? I mean, what happened to the Ramones? I mean, a lot of the people in the punk music scene, they didn't live very long, right? It was
Right. Yeah.
It really.
Well,
So,
we should mention, Ian Copeland, who's Miles Copeland Jr. Co-founded the CIA, and Ian Copeland was the founder of. He was the guy that promoted the new wave movement and alternative music. His brother Stuart Copeland is right there. Miles Copeland III promoted Oingo Boingo, of course, the Police. He founded FBI Talent Agency and IRS Records. But, and then, of course, Lana Lokteff worked for Miles Copeland, who was, that's one step from the creation of the CIA right there. But anyway, little segue right there. But I just wanted to mention that because, Ian and Miles Copeland and Stuart Copeland, they were all part of the promotion of that whole scene on to the masses at large via, their dad, who was a co-founder of the CIA.
yeah, yeah. And so before I go into that a little bit more, I do want to say, well, there was something kind of a DIY thing, right, with the punk movement, at least on a local level, that could have been kind of fun, and maybe and I think there's some kind of a little bit of fun in that scene, and that's not necessarily bad, but in fact, it could be a cool thing, right? If you're 15 years old and you're playing, as long as you don't stage dive and no one catches you,
Right.
and that's then that would suck. But before I get back into the history stuff, one thing though I started to notice, it started saying there was an element of cruelty starting to come into some of these punk shows, right? You do have some violence, you have some stuff, which you could maybe say you have at the sock hop, I don't know, Sha-na-na or whatever.
Sha-na-na. Wow. There's taking me back to my early, I was like 3 or 4 years old when I remember that on TV.
Yeah. Yeah. But just to, going back into it, so it is connected with this larger shift of the entire culture from if you look at the larger, patterns of, trauma, of cultural destabilization, of generational war, of ethnic and racial strife, etc. All these kind of percolating around the same times, and then which we've talked about in great detail. You look at Kennedy's assassination, you look at the Summer of Love, We Can Change the World, and suddenly you go from really good clean LSD to also putting out STP, which can cause permanent psychosis. I mean, it seems like a hellish drug, and then that goes into what? It goes into hard drugs, right?
Right.
Hard drugs, heroin, ludes, quaaludes. Well, quaaludes.
Yeah. Well, and I've exposed all of the whole history of that in my Spies in Academic Clothing article. I just read that the other day for the first time in a couple of years. It was pretty good, if I don't mind saying so myself. Very long.
I don't even really know what a quaalude is, but supposedly if you took a quaalude and went to a Tangerine Dream show, it's one of these like synth bands, like all synth, it was supposed to be like, reaching heaven or something. But but anyways, you have a lot of the, you have the whole fallout from that, but it's also a shattering of this collective belief, right? So what's there to take the place? Oh, you have this really disaffected, totally nihilistic type of music, right? So on one element of society, you have the whole self-help movement, just about me. You have all these broken families. Oh, I got to find myself. I'm just going to leave my wife and kids behind, and go out and raise goats on a commune and make a goat cheese or something, or
Yeah,
or
or go to Burning Man or something stupid.
yeah, I don't know why I thought of goat cheese. Probably I finished the goat cheese and I got in trouble. So that's a non sequitur. But
That sounds like a song. I finished the goat cheese and got in trouble.
no double entendres there, please, man.
Oh
Um,
man.
but yeah, so long-winded answer, but there's you can look at fundamentally. You look, at least by having a wider frame of music theory, right? Then you say, well, the philosophical orientation of this music is important. So it may not be a lot that's involved in terms of the chords, maybe like three or four chords. I could. My guitar's in the other room. I could play some like Sex Pistol songs or play New York Dolls or something. But you have this whole thing, this really gritty, club scene, but also this like sticking safety pins in your cheek, this kind of self-harm. And then we mentioned Gigi Allen, right? So what, not and locally, yeah, sure, it could have been fun and not necessarily going to be a harmful thing, but what did it lay, what was it is brought in as a reaction, right? Other things could have been promoted that would not have been part of the same trajectory, right? You don't have to go into nihilism, and for you, everything is not rock music. You don't have to go into more nihilistic rock music after your hippie icons have feet of clay, and you find out Mick Jagger, is a Satanist. Man, that was hard for me. Mick,
Well, yeah, I got into a conversation with a woman, I forget her name now, on the Dave McGowan forum on Facebook the other day, and she just, couldn't believe that that the Stones and Mick Jagger and all were Satanists. I'm like, well, here's our series and all exposing all that. Well, I'm not going to believe they're Satanist unless they say they're Satanist, and it's like, well, you understand Satanism through the behavior that they're doing. They don't just go out and say, hey, I'm a Satanist, because that ruins the whole thing of what they're doing, the spell or whatever that they're casting and how they're manipulating people, So it's having an understanding of what the Satanism is and how they're using it through music that I think you and I over the last decade have done a pretty good job of exposing.
yeah. And what's interesting, and just going back to that, and I don't know if we can show the images, but if you look at the Beatles albums and the Rolling Stones, they had an album come out right after that, and they would just kind of mirror it, but it was sort of in a darker way. And so, the classic example is their, Sergeant Pepper's and Their Satanic Majesty's Request. So that was it came out right after that other album, and it even had, and there's a lot of similarities, but they're sort of, in fact, of course, they go together, right? But the Beatles were seen as the good kids, and the Stones were the bad kids, even though the Stones, went to
Yeah,
like,
they were both. I can't stand listening to any of it anymore. There's this. I'm showing somebody's post from eBay here. That's what came up. But so there's that, and then of course you've got. Let me see here. Sergeant Pepper's we've got right here, and of course you've got the whole breakdown. This is who's on the cover of Sergeant Pepper's, Karl Marx. You've got Aleister Crowley, the Satanist. You've got Aldous Huxley, the head of MK Ultra, on there. All these people that were just doing crappy stuff. I guess I don't have the color one in there. I thought I did. Anyway, sorry about that, folks. But at least you can see what it looks like. And yeah, it is definitely a playoff of each other, and so they are mirroring each other. But I don't know. I mean, to me, both the Beatles and the Stones were equally satanic. The Beatles maybe even more so. And of course, the Beatles were working directly with Leary and MK Ultra, as I'm sure that the Stones were as well. And then the Stones did that whole Altamont thing, and Leary was there, so they're both working with Leary and MK Ultra. And you had George Lucas that was there filming that whole thing as well. So, which anybody who wants to know all of that stuff, go back and see all of Hans and my older stuff. Watch every single show. How many hours would that be? Like 90 hours worth of stuff? Watch it all.
Yeah.
They'll be like, shut up. I don't want to hear you guys ever again after the end of that. But
no way, Jan. They're going to hear us again and again.
Yeah, that's true. They will. Actually, you're right.
Yeah.
And there's probably quite a few people in the audience who have heard every episode. But it's about 7:30 now, and I've got Andrew's email, which I will forward to you, and so you guys can touch base on the book and whatnot. And
you could also, I just sent that I sent that other email address to you in the chat. You can just give him that one also.
Oh, on the chat here? I didn't even see that.
I did a private chat, yeah.
Yeah, great. So, well, do you want me to show it on here? Because everybody will see it.
No.
Okay. Yeah, you shouldn't send it here then, because it'll just go out to everybody.
Oh, it said private, but okay, yeah. But no, I mean,
I think since you sent that, the bottom bar won't disappear. So anyway, yeah. So I will contact him, and then what email address do you want people to have to reach out to you?
Well, it should, just the other one should work, but if it doesn't work, then that one.
What was the old one?
Just throw this hans@hotmail.com.
All right. And let's see. Next week, I have Steve Jones coming back on. We're going to have a really epic show about what caused World War II and what caused the Nazi uprising and all of that stuff. Some very interesting stuff that he's been sitting on for a while. So it's going to be quite epic. And, of course, Hans, thanks so much for tonight and having another epic episode with me here. Go to logosmedia.com. Please support the show. Patreon. There's a Cash App or something down there. Bitcoin you can donate through. Please hit the like and subscribe, everybody. Thanks so much for your time. Hans, thank you so much. Do you have anything you want to throw in before we wrap it up here?
Yeah, well, last thing just to say here is that, music, I think it's a time, maybe we can talk about this at some point in the future, but to really actually use music as a way, as sort of a protective mechanism and as a way to get through some of the stuff that's going on and some of the stuff that may be unfolding, right? So this is where
invert their stuff, basically. Is that what you're saying? Okay.
Yeah, just play everything backwards. Everything backwards, really loud.
Yeah, there you go.
No, but this is where I think there is some degree of protection, or whatever you want to call it, because we are made of electromagnetic resonances and frequencies. That's really what we are, and that's what is being the new the SpaceX, where it's just going to be blasting the whole ionosphere, is really going to block us, or I guess the attempted thing is to block us from our whole connection with the Earth itself.
What if I just put on one of Julian Huxley's tinfoil hats? Wouldn't that be?
I don't know, man. You could, it's but anyways, it's a time, I think, that this to connect as people that aren't necessarily, sucked into the vortex, and I think that music can be a very valuable method to even just understanding some of these vibrations and frequencies and things like that. I think there are some tools that are there. So we talk about that perhaps in the future. And it was a pleasure being here, Jan. It was a lot of fun, and sort of I just answered that one off topic. So obviously I could go into it more, but I stand by my answer. But
all right, well, we'll have to get you on again soon. There's a couple shows I got lined up. Let's see. So end of October, I think October 28th or 29th, which you've done a number of times for the anniversary show. That will be the 12th anniversary of the show, if you can believe that. So you did last year for the 11th anniversary. This will be the 12th. And then we did the War of the Worlds for, what was that, number 8 or 9, and et cetera, et cetera. So maybe I'll have you back around then if you're up for it.
Sounds good. Yeah. So.
Oh, somebody just posted, work up a Halloween show. There we go. Thanks, Earl, for the original idea. I never thought of that. So, all right, guys, everyone, thanks so much for the participation. Have a good night. Be safe out there. Things are a little bit crazy. And